time has come. So nice to see you all. Start with that. Thanks everybody for joining in. I think mostly familiar faces. Liz, I'm guessing you're stepping in for to handle all the background stuff. So thanks for doing
Jessica,
that.
Yes.
Jessica, I was going blank. So thanks for being here for that. Lots to talk about today. I think this, and yet it's the same stuff, but we've got some further information from Jim and from Jason to kind of update us on some thoughts on design things and further construction elements. Just might point out that since our last task force meeting, the library board has met, and we sent a statement to the Board of County Commissioners as the library board. And I think I had it here somewhere where I could read it, but basically the gist of the message was
Mitzi will post it right now.
What's that?
Mitzi's prepared to post it right now.
Are you? Go ahead, Mitzi.
In the chat, I think she's there. She is.
Give me a minute. It'll take a minute.
Okay. In that minute, I'll take this pause to, I'd like to, on what you just said, I'd like to raise a point of order. And my point of order is the purpose of this meeting is for us to talk. And if they have new ideas, I'd like to hear those. But to hear the same ideas we've already heard, that's going to eat up too much of our meeting. And I wonder if we could figure out a way not to do that.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone was planning on rehashing anything. I think it was things that have been developed since our last meeting.
But when I saw the presentation that came out, I can't find anything distinctly different about it.
That's because some additional slides, Grover, were added. We couldn't get the slides done in time to get something out. We wanted to get something out to you. You'll see those additional slides in the presentation, and they will be available on the website right after the meeting.
Okay, well, my point of order happens to do with the question that was asked at the February 16th meeting, which is what happened to the BCC approved strategy of working with library and community center stakeholders to identify all possible options. And the response was that strategy continues with these additional meetings. So that is the purpose of this meeting, and not to rehash the stuff that has been designed and we've seen. So could we limit it to just the new stuff and not all of the other stuff? That's my point of order in Robert's rules. I'm questioning our agenda.
I think we'll be very brief, but I think there are certain salient points that might be good to remind people of. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So if you guys were able to see in the chat, Mitzi shared what the Clackamas County Library Advisory Board recommended and sent on to the BCC, recommending that the Oak Lodge Library be separated from the school building, constructed sustainably and with the park working in concert with the library, and with the opportunity to discuss other options beyond the option 3, which was the original detached library option. I think probably most of you also saw, I only had a quick chance to see an email today from Ron Campbell representing the Concord partnership. And I think the gist of that was something was recommending that the library be stay attached, which was our original recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners some time ago. So we've got some things to discuss and consider from varying perspectives today. But let's let me see here. Cindy, I don't know if you have anything to add or before Jim and Jason go on to their part.
No, I'm just going to put the PowerPoint up, and as Jim said, the focus will be on some of the questions that were asked last time regarding placement of the library. We're also going to be going over the sustainable products that are already included in the design. So those will be the focus areas. And my computer is old, so bear with me, please. Can everybody see?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, this is a review of the agenda, the follow-up from the last meeting to continue the conversations. So the first probably large issue was around site development and placement of the library in response or in adjacency to the community center. So Jim, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, this should look familiar. We aren't showing option 2 anymore, so it brings the option, well, 1 and 2 footprint into focus as compared to option 3. One of the benefits of option 3 is how the park really comes out and engages the library and really kind of frames the drop-off, kind of shifted from its original location. So it's centered on the entry between the community center and library. Some comments brought up that we are looking to address is what is that relationship between the library and community center? Is that open space wide enough? What does it feel like? Is it an alley instead of an extension of the park? Which we want to respond to that. And then there was also the idea of creating a significant kind of outdoor gathering space off of the library that could be part of the park. Might even be a location for a spray ground or fountain feature, which was talked about at the last meeting. Is there an opportunity to include that in the park as well? So the answer to that is yes. You can go to the next slide. This is just kind of an enlarged view of option 3. Go to the next. And what this shows, yes, is how we're starting to really think more closely about what that space is between the library and community center. So now it was previously 20 feet. This is 25 plus feet. It starts to feel quite different. We're showing a pathway that connects from the entry terrace to the library that connects through this garden space. It's actually at the same level as the landing of the stair of the community center. So you can literally walk from the community center through that garden to the library. And then as you might recall in the plan of the library, there's the idea of a meeting room that's kind of tucked up at the kind of north end, the top part of the plan. And we're showing the potential, which we're really excited about, of having an outdoor meeting space off of that indoor meeting room. That's shown in that kind of wedge shape, white rectangle. So we're kind of excited how that space is starting to evolve. Go to the next slide. This gives you a little bit of a close-up of the plan, and then these 3D views that start to show you what the potential of that space is. We feel like it's at a width now where it feels like it could be a lovely garden. From that ramp that comes up, there's a walkway that takes you through that kind of sliver part and even up the stairs to the upper part, north end of the Concord property. And one of the things this shows too, I think is telling, is the massing of the free standing or standalone library steps down. So the height as you go towards the north is really just a little bit over 1 story. And so it starts to really open up the space, something that's a little hard to visualize in plan, but we really appreciate the comment that came up at the last time we met, that we also agree that the space was too narrow before. We feel like this is kind of finding that right balance, where it's a more passive walking space, but it doesn't take away from the overall park. Go to the next slide. This is another option that was brought up at the last meeting we wanted to respond to as well. As a freestanding library, what if it were kind of located more towards, we're calling the bottom of the property north, so plan north, it's also kind of northwest, but pushed up against the property line. In this case, the library's pulled away. It's more distant from the drop-off. Visibility to it isn't as strong from Concord as it would be in the prior location. This also shows how the children's playground might be an element that sits between the community center and the library. And as you know, that's where there is some topography. So kind of shaping the topography around that children's area. What it does is start to create kind of two zones to the park, two open spaces, but makes the open space in the upper left-hand corner much smaller in terms of just flexibility and events, leaving some landscape as you look to the left, or what would be to the west, plan west from the library. That could be a nice garden area, but it in the prior option, it becomes more of a usable park area. Kurt's going to talk more about it. We got this comparison slide, I believe, next. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, Kurt, would you like to share?
Yeah, and I think as we developed these two options, we tried to keep it apples to apples the best we could in terms of the play area size, the green space, and as Jim mentioned, with relocating the library, farther to Plan West, it begins to split up the green spaces into two rather than one kind of larger flexible space. Each has its own advantages and pros and cons. The other thing that we began to think about, and some of these things aren't immediately apparent, but fire access is very important to the project. And for the location on the left, we had it figured out where fire trucks were coming from Spalding, they were coming into the parking lot. As we move that library down, we might have to put in a fire access road coming from Olive that would then connect to the parking lot. So that might be up to 20 feet wide. Some of these things we just have to work through, but we just want to bring to your attention that as we begin to look at these different locations, there are some of these other things that we need to figure out. The other thing with that particular location too, though, it is a lot closer to the big box stores that are farther down to Plan South. And I know there's some large trees there right now. We probably have to supplement that with some additional trees just to help provide a better screen of those views. The grading is something that we added to the site, which we didn't have before. So those are those kind of white lines that you see running through the drawings. Each one represents one foot of grade change. Similar to the library and its a location on the left where it essentially kind of sunk down into the grade, we would have to do that the same thing with this alternative location. So given the grade change of about 15 to 20 feet from one side of the site to the other, we would still have to essentially kind of press that down into the site as well. So, those are some of the things. Certainly there's some synergy with the library being located closer to the community center. There's some aspects of it being located, away, which I think could be an advantage as well. But I guess maybe the last thing I'll say is just visibility from Concord is something that I think this group talked about from the very beginning. And as it is closer to the community center, I think you do have that visibility from the street. The farther you pull it away, you do see it, but it's not immediately recognizable. So those are just some of the things that we thought of as we went through these options.
Just two other points, because you hit them all, Kurt, but I do think the drop off really is much better when it's right in front of the both entries of the community center and library. Both entries are much more accessible. The library is pulled away enough. I mean, certainly could be perhaps reshaped. We just kind of showed this shape, but you would still have the issues of contours. And I do think the library entry being right next to the community center has some real advantages in terms of shared use of meeting room, large community gathering space, even the historic gym. All that's much closer, much like the, for those of you who toured the Furstenberg Center and the Cascade Park Library, having that direct proximity is an advantage. And I think kind of works with some of the rationale of even the option one when the two buildings were connected, when they're separated by that minimal amount of distance, there's more synergy between them. Go to the next slide. Now this is pretty familiar. I'm not going to dwell on this at all, but there is an operational efficiency in the layout of this more square shaped footprint, where the workrooms have much more exposure to the collection versus the more L-shaped configuration that's kind of a result of remodeling part of the existing Concord with an addition, where you end up with 2 service points versus 1. So that ties into the whole efficiency of how a library operates and staffing and costs associated with that. Go to the next image. This is a direct comparison of the area of collection and volumes, the area of the library kind of functional space with collection and seating areas is 10,700 in the option 1 and option 3. It's 9,300. So there's some area difference there, but the amount of volumes is actually not that different. 74,000 versus 70,000. And I think as mentioned previously, the current collection is 56. Those are kind of some of the highlights. You can see some of the other metrics of the square footages on the upper right-hand side. And then this is a comparison of the community center. In option 3, there's ultimately more available space for development into a community center versus the library utilizing part of the ground level, and then the shared space we have. There's just more flexibility. And when you add a future gym at some point, because the vision of the Concord School would not necessarily be that different other than having more space at the ground level between options 1 and 3. There is an additional 8,000 square feet of space ultimately with the future gym at 52,000. Go to the next slide. You know, there's a lot of discussion about sustainability in the option 2, where we didn't have the CLT roof or the radiant floor. It's still a sustainable building. Energy-wise, you can see the long list of features. The type of the VRF mechanical system is still very efficient. We did a comparison between that and a radiant floor. There's a savings of basically, you know, over a 20-year period, it's like $20,000. It's maybe around $1,000 a year. But with a radiant floor, you do get the comfort associated with that, and it, you know, it brings the heat source directly to the occupants. Water design in terms of efficiency is the same, and still looking at durable materials, bird-friendly glazing, connections to the park, in some ways even more enhanced, I think, in what we're showing now, especially the relationship between the Concord School and the library even has more of a feeling of being in the park. So we have looked at, the possibility as brought up of as we showed earlier, designs of a mass timber roof and radiant flooring. Those are additional strategies for discussion. The project isn't at this point a lead project, but we are using the AIA framework for design excellence. Our firm, we really prides ourselves in our sustainable design work. And we think of all of our projects from that lens. And so you can see below the categories, not only the ones on the left, but wellness, change and how we're utilizing resources, a sense of discovery and ecology. All these elements are part of how we think about the project. You can go to next. And so we wanted to just compare the edition version here compared to then the freestanding library. Drawing off some of the virtues that we shared previously of the shaping of the roofs of the addition, a little bit larger open space, that kind of sense of entry is really, we think, strong in the library, but also very compatible with the Concord School. So they're kind of cut from the same DNA, and the idea of a brick screen element that would filter light into the entry porch, and the notion of, this is just starting to show up, but a comment brought up at the last meeting, is there a way to create some of that brick texture and pattern that recalls the arched window above what's shown here, the gable roof and entry to the Concord School, so that filigree of brick above the entry porch is kind of carried around as, some form of brick pattern and texture that could really provide a nice human scale and a quality that ties it back to the Concord School. Just another kind of view back, how the two buildings start to talk and relate to each other. The kind of openness into the library space as you approach puts the library on display. And then you're looking through the entry lobby, through the meeting room to a north clerestory window. We'll go inside here. This is what we kind of showed previously, just the kind of the model where everything's kind of whitewashed. And one of the things that we've looked at more carefully is what is that view to the north or northwest, looking at a skylight there along that solid wall. So you're getting balanced light coming in from both the north clerestory monitor as well as the skylight that washes that north wall above the lower windows. Also that big framed window out to the park. So it really is about a library in the park and bringing the park into the library, and from the library engaging the park. So, and then this next image just starts to show what would happen if, in fact, there is a CLT roof that does bring a lot of warmth and character. CLT can also be DLT, and DLT is it's another type of cross-laminated timber where the wood members are turned vertically and just spaced a little bit apart, where there's a reveal and acoustical insulations integrated into it. We did a project, a new urban school in Clackamas, and it uses DLT. And it's a really neat material, because you get both the visual impact of the wood, the sustainability, and the acoustics all integrated together into the panel. But it's a big change. And this is when you start to see the difference between a view like this, which has the white ceiling, versus the next image shows the impact of if one started to use a DLT type product. And you also spatially start to feel how open bright and connected this building is to the environment with views to the park, North Clear-Story Light. So we're excited about the potential that this presents. And then lastly, kind of a view, you can go, yeah, great. Just showing that larger window viewing into the park, the idea of landscape. And as we get into a more trees and park-like environment being integrated into the library. And then that, what Kurt was showing, that kind of story time, small amphitheater seating zone that the library could actually open up and connect to. That area in front of it, that hard surface area, could even have a fountain feature, jets that might come out of the plaza surface. So has all the kind of elements that really were talked about previously. This zone here would have a different type of material. It's shown in kind of a faint reddish color, but that would be where this is taking a view from the playground. So you can see how prominent the playground is. And yet it's pulled away into the park and removed more from the parking lot. So just from a safety perspective, we think that's a positive thing.
So these next slides, there's no change from the last time. So I don't know that we need to get into any presentation about them. I think you've seen them a couple of times. And the same thing with the projected timelines. And then at the close of this meeting, we're going to spend a couple of minutes just talking about, y'all wanted, at the first joint meeting, the three groups wanted another joint meeting. So we want to talk about scheduling that, and then scheduling time with the board in early April. Over back to you, Doug.
All righty, so hang on here. So at this point, it's more about getting what people think. We've got hands up from Grover. Go ahead, Grover.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work that went in there. And if I saw correctly on the version that showed the library still being closer to the old schoolhouse, there looked like there were stairs behind it, that there was a pocket of space, or I forget which one it was. I can't, they're gone from my memory, but there was a place that in that space between the school and the library, there was a grass pocket and there were stairs that went up towards, which I thought was a great opportunity, because that actually could be a place for small meetings and presentations, et cetera, and use the stairs. Was that the intent, or did I just make that up?
You're seeing the white lines that look like stairs, the contours.
I don't know.
Even beyond, I think there are an existing set of stairs up at the north end, and the idea is to create a pathway that would connect up to the north end of the park and create a loop.
Yes.
Great. Well, what I wanted to say, so I just really did not want, oh, good, it's going to come back.
Can you see it?
Yeah, it's back farther in the presentation where I was referring to, because those lines are there we go, right there. See, on the other side of the plate, I guess I picked the wrong one.
Oh, yeah.
No, the one you were just on, back one. That one. You see from where the play area is north or up towards the parking lot, there seems like there's stairs there. Are those stairs? No, on the other side of the play area, up.
No, Grover, everything that's in white there and it's just doing it so it's visible, those are contours. So that would be a great change. However, I think providing some stairs or seating for parents would be something that we consider both on this one as well as the other scheme as well.
Okay, good. All right, so what I really want to say, besides thank you for doing that work, I appreciate it. I'm always concerned about how much work gets done with some thoughts from the group, et cetera. And every time you guys come up with nice stuff, I'm very clear that our job here is to honor the Concord School. But I want to be clear, having it farther away doesn't unhonor it. It actually lets it stand with all its glory from McLaughlin and everywhere else, and tucking it around the other way. And so the idea is, how do we maximize the park space? And I don't want to negate anything you did, but I want to get that in this conversation. And that is, there's been a bunch of work. Mark, who is an architect, did some work. We had several people went on site visits between the last time we met and now to actually look at the gradient changes. And the idea is, if we put the library effectively on Olive Avenue, you're not going to have to move as much dirt, and it will make the park space significantly bigger if you make it a full upper story, even with the current play field, and a partial lower story at the same level as the parking lot. It'd be 12,000 square feet on top and 4,000 square feet on the bottom. It would be significantly less dirt to be moved, one, and two, it makes the park area significantly bigger and still gives you lots of opportunity in between, like where you move the play area over, et cetera, et cetera. I am not you guys, you're professionals, you do a great job, but I want that to be considered, because you don't move all that dirt for free. And the idea is to have the square footage be 15, 16,000, but on the main floor that has to have eyes and staffing and all that, doing 12,000 square feet on that, and beautiful views and raised and so on and so forth is the thing that I at least like to be included. Mark, do you have any of that handy? And I don't know how anybody could see it. You're muted.
I'll bring it up here in a second. Hold on.
Okay. So while he's doing that, I just really want to be clear. The library does not have to mimic, it can honor, but it doesn't have to mimic the Concord building. This is a modern building. And I love the example that you used back when the master plan first came out, that one without all that brick on top with windows that went the full ceiling to the height, it certainly, with glass on the whole one end, I was in love with that. And I've never recovered from the shock of mimicking the Concord building as an extension of. So I just want to get that in there. The idea of shrinking the footprint and making more park space available is important. So Mark, what'd you figure out? You're muted, Mark. You're still muted, Mark.
Sorry about that. Somebody moved. Okay, so if I can share my screen, I'll just show you some really rudimentary stuff I put together here. So, okay. If you guys can see that, this was just a suggestion on similar to what OPSIS has put together, is kind of moving the two-story library farther from the community center and school, but looking at perhaps rectangular separation or rectangular footprint with the 15 to 16,000, 12 up, 4 down. And also just took a look at the space program that was put together, about 2020, I believe, at some of the areas that could potentially be put on another level that don't require staff observation or staff presence. So that's how I kind of came up with that 4,000 square foot area. So the intent here, I think, is to see that if taking advantage of some of the topography, it's possible to consider a lower level for these areas, and for that to take advantage of the topography change. I think when Grover and I just were looking out there ourselves, and we could see something in the neighborhood of like a 8 to 10 or 11 foot grade difference between the parking area and the upper open play field area. So that's really kind of what we came up with is when we're just looking at this rather quickly. So I'm happy to share that. Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted that to get put into the mix because it does free up more park space, and it does make a smaller footprint, and it takes advantage of the topography, and less dirt has to be moved. Because I have a real concern about how much water goes through that site. The water was pouring when we were there, through the site, not just from the sky.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's,
And
oh, go ahead.
well, I appreciate that option and beginning to kind of think through, I guess, just from a grading perspective, because I've been staring at the grades and the 15 to 20 foot grade change for a long time. And I think the one thing that you have out on the site right now, you definitely have that large kind of play field, and just conceptually the idea of putting a structure within that. The issue for us becomes how you navigate that and get ADA access from that upper level down to that lower level. And then how do you put in a play area the size that it is? And in order for that to meet the accessibility standards, essentially has to be flat. So a substantial amount of the grading that has to happen with any of these options is primarily because of the play area and also getting that ADA path up. And regardless of where you're putting the library, you're still having to spend a significant amount of money on that. So I don't want to take away from what you've done, but it's certainly part of that consideration.
Our only ask is give it a thought when you're not sitting here talking to us. I don't expect you to make, because every time, I love the fact that things get suggested and you guys, the wheels turn.
I agree, and I do, but I since we're all on the screen here, just a quick response on the library layout. Yeah, a rectangular footprint versus square. I think that's totally doable. I do think a two-story library, it's a real problem in terms of what you would put on the ground level. I agree with mechanical, Mark. Mechanical could go down there, but restrooms, workroom for staff, no. They need to be able to see. It's not that big of a library. In fact, all of the work we've been doing with Mitzi for years now, it's need to be able to, from that service point desk, to actually even see the restrooms. The workroom is vital to staff having that proximity to the rest of the library and being able to operate it with maybe only one person there. And when you go 2 stories, now you've got 2 stairs, you've got an elevator. There's a lot of additional costs. And functionally, for this size of a library, it's a real problem. I gave an example of McMinnville, where we're planning a new library for them, where it's 20,000 square feet on 2 levels. And they're having a heck of a time, you know, because they have to have staff down below, because you got to have a welcome desk. You can't just come on in and find your way up, you know, and someone has to be down there. And now you've got definitely 2 staff. It's just, you know, we've done everything we can to come up with a plan where only one librarian staff can really monitor a library. So those are all just kind of issues. I know in McMinnville, we're planning a 30,000 square foot library, and it's still 1 story for a very good reason. You know, adaptability, flexibility, these are really important qualities to a library now. So
thanks, Jim. All right, let's keep going. I've got a bunch of other people who wanted to comment. Michael, go ahead.
Well, thanks. I love the conversation. This relocated library plan that's down on Olive, that's new to me. I haven't seen that before. You kind of sprung it on me, and I would have enjoyed seeing it earlier, along with the included in the graph that shows how that affects park space, the way it's drafted, and costs and that sort of thing. I need that kind of information to make any kind of a judgmental decision. So I would appreciate it if somehow you could send that out. I'd like to see those numbers associated with that. I'm calling it option 4 because it wasn't one of the options before. It just came out of nowhere. But having said that, what does that do? The way it showed on the screen, what does that do to the acreage of the park space? And number two, what happens to Olive Avenue? What do you have to close that completely off? It's no longer an access at all? Question. That's it. Is that yours, Jim?
I'm gonna give it over to Kurt.
Yeah, well, I would say that because at this point we're using the same building footprint, that you essentially have the same amount of park space, but the types of park space are distributed. Instead of having one large open green space, you have two medium-sized spaces. So the types of spaces are certainly changed. And then, as you may have seen, the relationship between the major elements have changed. The play area is a little bit closer to the parking lot. It is less in the park, but it is between the two buildings. But to answer your question, it's basically the same amount of open space, but arranged in a different manner.
What about Olive Avenue? Do you have to vacate that?
No, Olive Avenue would remain the same. I think the big difference with that scheme is that you would then have to provide fire access. So you'd have to have a series of bollards at the end of Olive Avenue, and then you would have to essentially do a paved walkway that may be up to 15, 20 feet wide that could accommodate a fire truck that then would go all the way to the parking lot. So you'd have kind of bollards on both ends to allow for that emergency vehicle access.
I might just add, Kurt, I mean, the fire lanes they're 20 feet, 24 feet wide, I mean, typically. So and in the past, we've been able to use even like a kind of an open paver where lawn comes through it and limit the amount of paving. We're finding now more commonly that's not allowed. The fire marshal wants to see it be just solid paving. So you can imagine it starts to feel like a road instead of a pathway through a park. So that's something we aren't sure if that would happen, but the fire lane would definitely need to happen, and it would be a lot more of it, and it could have quite a visual impact on the park.
Well, I would appreciate it if staff would send out, I'm pointing at you, Jason. If you would send out another schematic that shows options 1. I mean, you've basically dropped option 2, but option 1, 3, and now 4, because I really would like to study that. I'd like to see how all that plays out.
Mike, I think the idea here was that there'd been some talk about the library being separate but being located elsewhere, not quite so close to the school. So they wanted, I think they were throwing that out here with not a whole lot into it, but just a suggestion of here's what it would look like, and maybe waiting to see what this task force, if there was interest in developing that versus sticking with our original other options. Am I correct on that?
On the 16th of January. It's in the comments.
All right, Gary, go ahead. Thanks for waiting.
Okay, my concern or question is along the same line in terms of Mike's option 4, in terms of you basically translated the building that was in option 3 to a location over by Olive Avenue, but what does that do to the views from the windows? Because from option 3, we had a view of the park from the windows on one side that now seem to be facing the back of the Walmart store. And maybe that hasn't been worked out yet, but what kind of views would be had from the new location in option 4?
Yeah, well, 2-story versus 1-story. I think there's functional challenges with the 2-story, but with the 1-story, there is the sight lines more on the roof of the Walmart. Beyond that, if you mask it, you could probably see the foothills of the West Hills, could be nice, but you really need to remove visually the foreground to make that happen. And then on the park side, the north side, you're still having a retaining wall there, you know, in any scenario. You know, maybe it's a lower retaining wall. We had one at 8 feet in the option 3. This one maybe 5 or 6 feet, but it's more of a clear story view with bookcases below, kind of like what we're showing in that view of the children's library, where the bookcases are in the back and there's a high clear story window. You could open up towards the west like we're showing in option 3, but your amount of park is very limited because now your view quarters back to Olive and it's more of a smaller garden, whereas in option 3 you have that sense of expansion visually into a park. So I think they're very different from each other. And I also think the more it pulls to the west, the entry, it's just a more challenge in terms of the drop off. You know, when we have bad weather, you just want to not have to walk very far to get to the entry. And then the separation between the library and the community center, I think they're still on the same campus, but they aren't right next to each other. So the shared use of popping across to a meeting, you know, a lecture by an artist or something would be it's just physically more removed.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've seen in some of the libraries we've visited is when they're located in a park, it's a real nice atmosphere to be able to look out the window and see the park and really get the full view. I was just a little concerned that option 4, for want of a better term, precludes some of that option of looking at, you know, a park. I guess nobody else agrees.
Well, you want to comment, if they just flipped it over the other way and rotated it 45 degrees, you'd get the view right up into the park area.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to be clear, the difference between where the 2 libraries and these 2 pictures are and the library, we're not talking 40, 50 feet. So I'm a bit concerned about this comment about no more proximity.
Actually, it's a big difference. The entries there's probably a 200-foot difference. Those parking stalls between those black lines, 60 feet.
60 feet.
Yeah, so it's probably 150 feet.
Okay.
It's not an insignificant distance at all. It's pretty significant.
Oh, that's my only question.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, Kim, you've been waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just came here to say that I know last time we discussed the financials and I requested seeing some more information on the financials. I just came not to understand we need to make compromises. I'm just going to continue to state, if we're here to be stewards of community funds, it is extremely difficult to make an informed decision without having more clarity on what's happening with the financials, including what the operating costs are of options 1, 2, and 3. If there is a savings in option 1 versus option 3, what happened with the original funds versus what we have now, if there is a chance that's going to change in the future. So I would again like to put in a request to see financials.
See, and I don't know if Jason or Cindy, if that's something that goes to you guys to see what further you can come up with that might help clarify some of those things that Kim's concerned about.
So in terms of the financials and my understanding, and folks correct me if I'm wrong, that the perceived savings initially were around the construction by putting the 2 buildings together, that there was not a savings in operations by having an attached library. Mitzi, can you clarify that?
Yes, I would agree with that. In option one, we did have 2 service desks out on the floor, as opposed to in option 3, we were trying to make it work with just 1 service desk. So that is a difference operationally. But there was no savings in having that connection.
Okay, I still think it's important for us to gain more clarity, especially after Commissioner Savis's comments last meeting about discrepancies and what his perceived budget was versus what the current budget is. Please feel free to hit me with all the numbers. I'm a numbers geek. I'm an investment geek. I'd love to see it. Please send it to me. Thank you.
Two.
All
It
right.
would be helpful, Doug, maybe Kim, specifically what questions, I mean, we have an operations budget. You've seen the funding and the costs and the available funding for the different options, except for this last option 4, and we didn't go into that with the sign. We haven't costed that out. Again, that was, we put a plan together in response to the last meeting to show where if the library was moved. So we haven't done any cost work with that because we don't know what the group's feeling about it is. So
I'm still confused about where the discrepancy comes in between the 2 budgets. And it just feels like there's a lot of cloudiness around what the reality of the funding sources are. And also, thank you, Mitzi, for that commentary, but, regarding the community center as well, having NCPRD located in the community center, we're talking about being fiscally responsible and making sure that this is a sustainable project for years to come. And the original notion behind reducing the cost of this project was that NCPRD couldn't sustain the costs in the future. So with that in mind, I'd like to see why and what that means, and what these various options would look like as far as functionally running this goes. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I think, there was a slide that showed the available funding for the community center, which showed the previous funding that went along with the master plan versus the current funding. And you can see the difference in those various areas. One of them was in terms of the revenue bond. The revenue bond assumed that there would be a general obligation bond issued, and that process is a much longer involved process and typically is not done with one specific project. And I can send you some information about general obligation bonds. And there were assumptions made in the first go around in the master plan that just aren't coming true. And so they were aspirational assumptions, but the reality is the money isn't there. For example, there was an assumption that the project would get $2 million in grant funds. Well, those were never identified. So I can go through each of those if you like and send you something on that, but that's, really.
That would be helpful. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Appreciate it.
I would like it as well, please.
I would like it as well, please.
Well, everybody should get the same information, so.
Yeah, we
We'll
can
just send it out to everybody, and the task force has that.
Yeah,
thanks.
Okay.
That'd be great, Cindy. Thanks. Okay, Ron, go ahead.
I'll let Commissioner Savis go first.
All right. Commissioner Savis.
Sure.
Welcome.
Thank you, Kim, and everyone for your interest in the financials. I'll try to, I think what I'm hearing, well, I don't think, I know what I'm hearing. I think I've been hearing this since November. It's how did we go from being able to fund a project around $20 million to suddenly not having any money at all? And so I think that, honestly, I think that needs to be explained. There was a financial plan. I think that needs to be, we need to be transparent about that. And we need to tell folks what the plan was and how we get it back on track. And if we can't get it back on track, where, what, and what are those gaps that would either allow us or disallow us from getting it back on track. I agree. that even the operational aspects need to be shared, but I'm really struggling, frankly. I'm hoping our staff can come together and display that. You know, I can produce, if needed, some of those numbers. I simply can't produce all of them. And I need staff support to actually do that. And I think that you all have been here working on this project for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. You all deserve that. We spent millions of dollars on this effort with the presumption that we had the money. We just can't simply say, government can't simply say, one day, suddenly we have a $20 million shortfall, and we're not going to talk about it. I think we need to explain it. I think the public deserves that. I live my life being transparent. I think the county needs to do the same here.
Thanks, Commissioner. Ron, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to apologize in advance here if I'm coughing a bit while I'm trying to talk. I've got a little bit of a cough that I can't seem to shake, but and I don't believe it's COVID, so don't worry. But first of all, good job on these designs. You know, I'm impressed with what you've done here. I'm a bit surprised because I was not given the impression that that there was going to be much more in the way of design work, or at least conceptual design work, except for the park. So I appreciate, as Mike mentioned, I appreciate seeing some diagrams that illustrate the options you're talking about now, and that helps a great deal. Now, do I understand correctly then that with the two options, two locations of the freestanding library that have been presented here, not counting what Mark was just talking about with the two-story, do I understand then that we're talking about a single level library of the 15,000 square foot size? I mean, it appears so in the diagrams, but I just want to confirm that, and it looked like the numbers confirm that, and that is the case. So, you know, that is encouraging because, as you all know, one of the sticking points for me has been the park space, and along those lines, I'm very, very glad to hear that there's a lot more discussion about the need to preserve the park space, because I feel like we haven't heard enough of that lately. And now it seems like we're getting closer to being on the same track, and that is very encouraging. One question, well, several questions actually. I think what I heard was there isn't a great deal of concern with the one option that moves the building farther away. Isn't a lot of concern about it being farther from the parking. I just want to be sure that that is the case, and I don't think you would have presented it that way if that wasn't the case. But that's been one of my concerns, you know, about pushing the building farther away, and, you know, that resulting in pushing the parking and drop off farther away. You know, yes, the drop off is pushed farther away, but anyway, once again, good job on the design. It looks like I couldn't quite pick it out very well in the diagrams, but are we still talking about a loop trail? I mean, I'm seeing some pathways there, so we're actually talking about an accessible loop trail, I believe, in conjunction with the park. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Okay, and on the option that keeps the freestanding library closer to the existing building, what once again is the distance then between the two buildings? I thought I heard it's actually more than 20 feet now, but what is that actually?
Yeah, originally it was 20 feet. That's kind of a code minimum to be able to have windows on both buildings without protecting them with fire shutter or some other method. This is 25 feet. Not the next plan kind of shows it a little better, but yeah, the number 5 slide. Yeah, there you go. anyway, it's, I believe, Kurt, we ended on like 25 feet between.
Yeah, just slightly larger than 25.
It's slightly,
yeah.
but it made a big difference, you know. It was, you know, quite an impact to slide it. And, you know, it's not to say it's right yet, but the idea was to make a purposeful, a nice open space between the two buildings, but not push it so far that we're taking away from the larger park. So that was the balance that we were trying to do.
And that's not significantly different. And that's what I needed to hear.
No, it isn't. And you can see the relationship of the drop off. It's basically just as close because of the geometry of the long kind of area for buses or cars to pull up. So the distance from the physical drop off to the entry door is not it's the same.
Okay, thank you. And let me see, the park space, you know, I'm with Mike on this as far as really wanting to know some numbers here, you know, just to get a better sense of what the comparative park space is. It actually looks quite good in these diagrams, and you know, once again, I think you've done a good job on the design here, but I would like to hear the numbers. And regarding Olive Avenue and the need for fire access with one of these designs, you know, and you were talking a bit about the surface and what it needs to be. And I would hope that that wouldn't be pavement, you know, that it could at least be, you know, a hardscape surface that is a bit more interesting than just a regular concrete surface, you know, if that can be, you know, surfaced in a way so that it actually meets code, meets, you know, fire access standards and so on, but it could actually appear to be more of a usable space. And that might be a little challenging if you're just talking about a straight 20-foot wide roadway. I don't know that this, you know, the surface might make some difference, but that could be a little bit kind of a distraction, if I might say so. But you know, I agree that the closer proximity of the buildings does improve the synergy. I think that is important. And so my first impression, you know, thinking about one of these options versus the other one, is that at this point at least, I might, you know, be more likely to favor the closer proximity just because of that synergy. And I think that's all I have for now, except that, you know, when we're back to the square footage of the building, you know, if we reach a point where we're all agreeing to a smaller footprint freestanding library, is that something we can count on, you know? And you know, I don't really expect an answer to that right now, but what I would not want to see is, as we move through the process, you know, all of a sudden the numbers start to grow. So, you know, I'm with the rest of you. I don't want to see the library undersized. I was quite impressed with the option 3 design, but also concerned that the smaller footprint, or actually smaller square footage, just might not be acceptable, you know, to a large part of the group. And I think that's what I've been hearing. And, you know, back to one of my earlier points, was it was kind of a sticking point because the full 19,500 square feet on a single level freestanding just didn't seem to work when it was tested before, and or at least not for the preservation of park space. So I wouldn't want to see that number grow. So I would like us to end up with something that actually is acceptable to everyone. And in particular, you know, I pay a lot of attention to what the library management the library managers have to say about this. You know, I feel like they have the most experience, they have the most knowledge about what's actually needed in terms of library size and how well it's going to function. You know, and so I would like to see us reach a point where we're actually adhering to something and we can all count on that. And that's all I'm going to have to say for now. So I'm ready to move on.
Thanks, Ron. Christy, go ahead. Thanks for waiting. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So first I wanted to say thank you to the design team. I again want to repeat that I feel very heard, and you guys have been here in the whole process. And I appreciate that you are staying true to our needs and what the community needs and working with us. So I want to thank you for going down this road with us. But I want to also second what Commissioner Savas said. 100% wholeheartedly believe in what he said. For those of us who have been along this process the whole time, there is no reason why there shouldn't be the previous numbers that were showed to us before and the new numbers in side by side, and be able to go through line by line why there is no funding or why is it that the funding has changed. I still have a, feeling and a lack of trust in, not seeing numbers and not seeing those exact things side by side. Because I just from the get-go, the attitude from NCPRD and the county towards our group, and speaking of us as if we are still spoiled children who are sticking our hand in the candy dish too much. I can't get over that because we haven't discussed that. We haven't faced that. I don't think that our group is being valued in our time and energy put into this project. And so I do want to thank those of us who have been here, this whole group the whole time, and the design team. But I really want to hear exactly what changed and how it all went away.
I don't know, Jason or Michael Bork, if you can, I feel like that has been kind of discussed somewhat in the past, at least in terms of losing Happy Valley from the North Clackamas Parks and Rec budget, and then of course the construction costs, things like that. But I don't know if either of you wants to comment after what Cindy had to, or excuse me, what Christy had to say.
This is Mike Bork. Sorry, my video is not working right now. We've explained this, but let me go over this again. This is the side-by-side comparison of the original funding as it had been presented several years ago, and the available funding. In the original funding, you can see when you add all of those up, right at the very bottom, there's an NCPRD portion of a revenue bond. With that revenue bond, that still only adds up to $21 to $23 million. When I got here in August, that number was already up to $28 million for the actual project cost. So even if we had this fully funded plan with a $9.5 million revenue bond, we would still have a significant gap of unplanned for funding, $8 to $10 million, depending on which number you use. The problem that I ran into is operating the Concord facility is one thing. It's going to bring in revenue. We already know as a community center, like Milwaukee Community Center, like the pool, it's going to be subsidized because we can't charge enough rent or classroom spaces for keeping it at a community level to recoup all of its operational costs. Electricity, utilities, etc. So when I saw this funding plan, and I've seen another version that also had a $13 million revenue bond, either of these revenue bonds require a debt service payment. And so as I've said from the get-go, our problem wasn't with the budget as the numbers are shown in the 7.7 million of funds that we believe are available once grants come in and land sales, et cetera. The problem is even at a $9.5 million revenue bond, that would equate, I believe that was about a $750,000 a year debt service payment. And because I'm not bringing in any profit definitively on that facility, nor do we have any other sources of other revenues coming in to the tune of $750,000 a year, that's an unsustainable debt service. It's going to draw down our fund balance and deplete it eventually. That was what my message was from the get-go, was even if we had done this unsustainable revenue bond, we would still have an $8 to $10 million gap to fill that nobody had planned for. It had always just been left as, we'll find it. So nothing has really changed per se as far as what the money is. The money that was listed in the budget, a big chunk of it just was not there. It was what a plan was, but that plan was not sustainable. Beyond that, I had asked, well, how did this move forward? And my understanding was the thought was we would do a general obligation bond, and this is what Cindy had spoken about. We would do a general obligation bond of, say, $20 million for the project, and then we would pay the debt service on the revenue bond with the general obligation bond. And I can say from a financing perspective and bonds and trying to get ballot measures passed, first of all, what happens if the bond fails? We're then in that unsustainable position. But generally, people aren't going to vote favorably on a general obligation bond to raise their property taxes to pay off a debt that we already bear, to pay off a debt service. So for a variety of reasons, it just wasn't a sustainable plan. And I can't answer to why that wasn't made clear before I got here in August. But as soon as I saw that, I brought it to the attention of everybody, and we started having these conversations. There was no money put into any accounts or sides of $28 million or $20 million or anything that I'm saying has disappeared. The money wasn't there from the beginning. So I hope that clears up some of that. And I'd be willing to answer any questions if you have.
Yeah. So where did the property sale proceeds from $5 to $9 million? How did that get reduced to 4.5?
I don't know where the $5 to $9 million came from. That was in the original plan. When I sat down and tried to refigure what we actually have, $3 million is sitting in our asset development funds, and those are the proceeds from the Hoodview sale. In addition to that, there were plans potentially to sell the Justice property, and we have another piece of property called the Vogel property. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, the community has spoken, and the Justice property, the community desires it to be developed into park space of some sort, and so that sale is not available. Vogel property is not a easy land sale. There's metro money tied up into it. There's other things, and we currently haven't even gotten an appraisal on it. So the $4.5 million is actually $3 million of what we actually have. Now, with that said, you can see there was a $1.8 million general fund reserve contribution in the original budget. And I'm comfortable saying that would still be part of that fund, raising that $7.7 million up to go to the original obligation. When I first got here and I was putting that together, I did not have a good handle on what my fund balances were and what I had for, actual fund balance, transferability, things like that. Now I've got a handle on that. And so that this just hasn't been updated to reflect any of this new information that's coming in. Grants, there's $500,000 in grants. Originally it was $2 million. Grant money just is not as available as it was maybe a few years ago in Oregon than what was planned. Even the $500,000 right now, we're hoping that comes through as Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, but that grant doesn't even open until later on this year for us to even apply for. So, but with that said, again, I wish I had had better news when I came on as the brand new director, but I was faced with the reality of a plan that even if we did an unsustainable revenue bond, it still left us millions of dollars short. and that unsustainable bond, just I couldn't get past that of paying debt service that would deplete our accounts in just a few short years. It wasn't 20 years from now, it was in 5 to 6 years that our general fund accounts would be just depleted. So yeah, I hope that answered that.
It did, thank you. I just, what I'm hearing is it's not that we're a bunch of spoiled children asking for too big of a library. What I'm hearing is before your position, the numbers were not calculated or communicated to us correctly.
Yes, and I do want to say I have never said anything like that. I love the original plan. I have no problem with the original plan, other than its affordability in what I've got for available dollars. But yes, I would agree with that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I just wanted to weigh in on my thoughts on the projects as we've gone. I'm getting a little discouraged. I feel like, yes, I want to be sure we're considering all options and we get the best option for this project. But at the same time, the more we toss these things around, Jim and Liz and Kurt and others, they don't do this work for free, coming up with more plans. They're more than happy to crunch more numbers for us and calculate things. And yes, they've been doing some great jobs with all the different ideas they've come up with for us, and their adaptability and with in response to our interests and our questions has been great. But it's both time and money that is continuing on. I don't like the idea of putting the library further from the school. I think the synergy that Jim was talking about is not just an aesthetic thing, but it's also a practical thing. Our original plan of having them connected and the possibilities of collaboration and such, was what we originally were going with. At the same time, I'm now firmly believing that they should be separate, just for the future outlook of both buildings, both facilities, keeping them distinct, but not so separate that it's difficult for them to connect. If I think of it as a librarian working in a library like that, and having the ability of having a bigger presentation, a bigger project, a bigger event, being able to pop next door, as opposed to, especially in the weather that Oregon has, that we're experiencing right now, trekking across, that distance. There's a lot of compatibility, I feel like, in having those together. And I'm appreciating the design of the new, of the option 3 that's shaped up. I'd rather not get into spending too much time looking at and pushing for more information on that option 4, because I feel like that's a waste of our time, and it's a waste of staff time, personally. If there's enough other people who think that's got lots of potential, then go for it. But I think the option 3 that we were looking at actually also, to me, makes the best use of the park space as well, without having it interrupted by the library kind of getting stuck over that way. I have to say, personally, I like the brick look also. I feel like complementing the school with that. And I can tell that with that, I don't know what Jim, you called it, over the opening, where it's almost a brick screen of sorts.
That's what it is.
I'm excited I personally was excited to see that look, because I think, there were elements of it in the original plan, and I think it could be both echoing the historic look of the school, but also having something more of a contemporary feel to it, in terms of the aesthetics. So I'd really like to see this group kind of come to a discussion on things, a decision on things, and see where where people stand. I feel like we're trying to consider too many options, and we could keep adding options around for a while, and that's kind of discouraging. I'm also interested in hearing what Mitzi has to say, because there's a lot to be said from her perspective, from a library perspective, in terms of what would fit. And of course, she's a county worker, employee, and we're here for, as the public, to have our say, and yet I think getting her 2 cents would be valuable for us to really be able to consider. So those are my thoughts, at least at the moment. I think I had more, but there's a lot going on, and I'm kind of trying to respond and react to everything at the same time. But Gary, you've been waiting, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I just wanted to address something that I keep hearing over and over and over, and I don't think people understand when they're talking about a 19,500 square foot library that they're losing out by going to a smaller looking building, the option 3, for example, where it's in the, and we touched on this, I think, in the last meeting, but it's in one of the slides where the shared space on option 1 is 3,800 square feet. It's hallways and a lobby and restrooms and things in another building from the library. And by the time you subtract, that's 20% of the 19,500 feet. You take that out, it comes out to a little over 15,000 square feet, which is what option 3 offers in terms of a library. So people aren't really losing anything in terms of a library. And in fact, maybe gaining something in the sense that when the library includes that shared space in option 1, librarians are going to be responsible for patrolling, monitoring what's going on in the next building all the way to the other end of that building. That's where the trouble's going to be. They're going to have to be watching night and day the kids running down to the other end of the building, getting into trouble. So that lessens the load on the librarians right there. But you're not gaining any library space by having shared space in the building. Anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, that's the other thing I kind of meant to add when I was talking earlier. The square footage, if we were to take a freestanding building, a freestanding library, and try and make it 19,000 square feet, not only would we lose park space, but most of the space that would be added would be meeting room space. And we've got a school right next door with more meeting room space than the library could possibly need. So it would seem foolish to try and expand the footprint of a detached library just to try and make a 19,000 square foot facility out of it. All right, Mitzi, go ahead.
Dennis.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. Ron had talked earlier about wanting to hear from the library manager about the staffing levels. And I just wanted to make it clear that we do not have the operational budget that you typically see in a library that's 19,500 square feet. That doesn't mean that we can't make it work. It means that we've got to be careful about the choices that we make with the design, and that what we come up with has to be staffable. Otherwise, we're going to end up seeing the library closed for different days because of not having enough money to operate. Meeting rooms, study rooms, history room, things like that really don't add to the requirement for staffing levels. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that the collection size is also important because it does have an impact on the staffing that's required. Any questions about that?
Thanks, Mitzi. Dennis, you've been waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Great stuff going on. Great work to begin the meeting. For me, a lot more clarity. I guess I did have questions, but I think Doug and Mitzi have answered them about the size issue when we extract the library from the community center. I don't think we lose all of that size. And folks have said it's like hallways and bathrooms, that sort of thing. But I think there is still, if they're close, there's still opportunity to access size in the community center. For big meetings, different small groups, I think there'll be a lot of opportunity to do that, like outflow from the library. For me, I really like the library and the community center close, not attached. And it all comes to the entry. When I draw a schematic of that, I'm really looking at flow going on. You have people coming out of the parking lot and flowing into the library, flowing into the community center. That area right there, I think is going to be awesome. And then you have flow going from the library into the community center, both maybe by staff having meetings and that, but by patrons, like at the library in Washington, we took the walk from the library a short distance right into the community center. So all this energy around that space between the two buildings, the entries, that's lovely. That's awesome. And I think folks will really like that. Like almost like your the den in your house, you know, people are going to be coming, milling around there, gathering, coming in contact. So I really like that. I'm not myself interested in moving it over near Olive. That just sounds like we're going to run into cha-ching over and over again. I mean, building a road sounds crazy to me. Not that it can't be done, but it just sounds like we just got through talking about money, and I don't want to go back there. It is what it is. I want to know what we have now and what's a possibility of other funding. But I think we've taken a big step forward. I want to take 2 more steps forward. I want to move forward and get this going. So I would say put the libraries separate but close. I love the designs. So for me, I'm kind of ready to get going. Thanks.
Thanks, Dennis. We've got Paul and Mark, and we're coming up almost exactly on when we said we were going to end this meeting, but we do have a number of people from the public who are here, and I do want to hear what some of the public comments, as well as kind of come to some sort of thoughts on where we're going to go from here. So, but please, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I've kind of been quietly listening to everything here, and I kind of appreciate the options, appreciate all the discussion, and a lot of the last couple of comments from Dennis is I'm in the same boat. It's like, okay, the money is the money. We know where we are. We are where we are. It's time to accept some of this and move forward. I can go into another discussion on that, but I won't. I like the idea of option 3. I'm representing the Friends of the Library group here, so I'm distinctly biased. I do think we need to separate the whatever issues the community center is going to have or opportunities they have with their building from basically needing to get this library moving and built. They're already using the community center, great. They can figure out that can be figured out as a separate path, but we need to commit to getting this library moving. I've heard the county many times say, oh, well, if there's a funding gap on the library side, we'll plug the funding gap. I'd like to see that happen and be able to come back with the sustainability, come back with the features that we like and make it something that we're really proud of. I like it closer to the community center. I appreciate the exploration of moving it away. The synergy that I think Dennis was also talking about of having those entries right next to each other, I think is going to be really important, having it close to the parking lot. If there's one thing about option 3 that I would like to make sure people are considering, and it's a detail, is that I think we've overreacted a little bit to the previous comments about putting it down, aligning it with the community center. It kind of felt like it was pushed down. What you've done is raised it up on a podium and a platform, which unfortunately adds steps and it adds a ramp. I know you got the ramp for accessibility, but if you ever tried to push yourself up a wheelchair, I don't care what the ramp is, it's still a challenge. And I know accessibility, both physical and societal, is really important to this project. So I would encourage us to maybe rethink, that level of that floor so that we're not putting steps in between or a ramp in between the main entry and the building or the parking drop off in the building. I just think that's something to design in from the beginning might be a a real challenge for many people in the future. So anyway, that's it. I support option 3. I'd love to see this thing, you know, I don't know how we get to this decision point, but I think we need to kind of work on that and move forward and get this thing rolling. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Mark. Gonna need to unmute.
Okay, sorry about that. So just want to make a couple of comments and what I hope is transparency. First, I wanted to comment on the 15,000 square feet. When you look at the original space program that was put together for this project, the baseline square footage for library functions was 14,000, a little over 14,000 square feet. That does not include a lobby, doesn't include community rooms or other spaces or multipliers that are used to determine gross square footage. So I still question whether 15,000 square feet meets the need. Second, I would like to mention that to my understanding, the sustainability elements that were presented here are code minimum requirements. In other words, these are things you have to do. They are not a choice. They are things you have to do in order to get a building permit for this building. I think there's other elements that we've been talking about that would be valuable. And the reason they would be valuable is that the initial cost of this building is not a burden to the library system. Their portion of this library project is only 12% of the overall cost of the building. However, they are going to have to maintain and operate this building for 50+ years. So any dollar that we spend on sustainability elements that save energy costs are going to affect their bottom line every single year from day 1 to day 50 years later. So I don't think we should ever give up on looking at additional sustainability elements that are beyond code minimum. And the third thing I'd just like to finish with is I think that in option 3, as with the building being closer, 25-foot space is better. I would also like to suggest that we could move the building farther to the west so that there is not an alignment with the existing building. I don't think there's any particular reason to align them since they are not connected. And any element that any opportunity we have to move the building farther to the west gives it more prominence and also reduces the amount of dirt that we're going to have to move. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. As always, appreciate your insight and your comments. And I don't know if there's anything of what Mark just said that, Jim, that you wanted to respond to at this point.
Yeah, the exact placement of the building, that's something for sure that we can continue to look at, whether it moves. We've been calling west, south, but I know you mean moving it towards the parking lot or drop off. So yeah, that's all negotiable. I think, I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say it's just code minimum. It's beyond code minimum. Our mechanical engineer who does sustainable, work all over the country. And, we did the Zoo Education Center, net zero building, top 10 project in the country. I mean, there are a lot of the same systems are being applied to this project in terms of efficient lighting. The mechanical system, if it doesn't go radiant heat, is almost as efficient energy-wise. Radiant heat would be better though. It's occupant comfort, and it's the right way to deliver a comfortable environment in an energy efficient way. Monetarily, it doesn't save that much, $1,000 a year. So we have run those metrics, PV array and all that's all on the table. Daylighting is a huge part of sustainability. And I think what this current design is even enhancement over what we had before, especially with the north clear story window, which brings daylight right into the heart of the library. I think it's going to be amazing that way. Bird-friendly glass, a lot of the, the features that you would think of a sustainable building having, this would have, healthy materials. I mean, we go down the line so I think the list that we had there was definitely beyond code minimum. I think that's the truth. But yeah, we can continue to embellish, and I appreciate the fact that, looking at a cross-laminated timber or, mass plywood roof is really exciting, and for many reasons. And, it's works towards, it's a carbon sequestering material. It's of our region. All those things are great, especially if we could build acoustics into it. Acoustics are a big part of sustainability now. And as you saw, the metrics down below that the AIA are using to validate whether a project's sustainable or not, I think we're hitting all those. So I probably went too deep, but I believe, it's a sustainable building, but it could be more sustainable with some of the features that are being suggested.
I'd like to think, definitely this task force, and we're hearing echoes from throughout the community that there's a strong and solid interest in sustainability in this project, and we are also hearing. I feel like we're getting hints, at least from the county, that the county is willing to contribute funding to make this project happen. So maybe with the right amount of pressure, I don't want to call it pressure, that sounds aggressive, but the right amount of feedback from our group and from others. The library board has already expressed specifically our interest in a sustainable project, and the community members as well. I think we might be able to perhaps get the county to cough up enough to make this what would be considered even further sustainable than what we're already getting. Hopefully, not with taxing too much more, Jim, on the kind of stuff we'd be asking you to add. But if we could do that, and give you a green light for even further, I'd like to see us being able to make that happen.
Yeah,
whether we have that power, I don't know.
That I think it's up to you all to think about, but why, this project is set up to be very sustainable, really a model that the community could be proud of. And, it'd be great to see a LEED gold plaque or platinum on this building, and I think this could definitely be a LEED gold building. But there's some additional funding to make that happen. And, there was a good reason why it wasn't included before, mainly, for that reason. And so that's something you could think about as well.
All right, thanks, Jim. Dennis, Ron, you both have quick comments, I hope, because we've got others who are waiting to speak. I'm assuming we've got public waiting to speak. I haven't looked yet. Dennis?
I'm good. Thank you.
You sure? All right.
Yeah, my comments very quick. I was just wondering if we could have a quick look at the schematics that shows the site plan again, so we can get a sense of what Mark was talking about sliding the building a bit to the west.
And can we clarify which way is west? I'm real confused. McLaughlin to me runs north-south, and you guys are using a different reference. And can we have a north arrow on these drawings, please?
We've taken note. Yeah, thank you.
It's not the first time we've asked.
We totally appreciate that.
Oh.
The sun sets at the bottom of those pictures, just so you know.
So in other words, sliding the building towards the bottom of the diagram.
Yeah, I do. It actually does come forward a little bit of the existing facade of the Concord, and it could slide more. Again, it's a very similar discussion to what we were talking about, the space between the Concord School and the library. That's really important to get that right. We also want to make sure that there's enough landscape, both as a buffer and as arm that comes out, that defines that that edge of the parking lot where you feel like it's an arm of the park coming out, and we want to have landscape around the building. And we also want a generous sense of walkway to the park. So it's what's that balance, you know, and there's no reason the building can't move. But we want to make sure that, you know, Kurt can speak to this, that, you know, we don't end up feeling like it's too narrow. You know, that would be my one concern. Kurt, do you want to chime in?
Well, sure. You know, it's also about kind of sight lines into the park and being able to feel like there's a real graceful transition between the parking lot, the entry to the community center as you kind of make your way in there. So certainly I think there can be some movement, but it's also just thinking about, you know, what is happening along those two sides to make that park feel really inviting.
I feel like I saw a slide somewhere that said that ramp was going up 2.5 feet.
That's about two.
So,
2 feet,
so you'd have to think about looking at those gradient lines, how far west you'd have to move the building to make up 2.5 feet. And that's, I think then what you're doing is you're putting the library where it's blocking. I mean, I absolutely understand, Paul, the interest in making this as accessible as possible. But at the same time, you know, that you're kind of inhibiting things. The library where I work now I'm trying to think, the ramp is probably going up 5 feet, and people make it, but it is a struggle. But 2.5. So when I saw the 2.5 feet, I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. But of course, every little bit, you're right, Paul, is definitely an obstacle. But by the time you move the building enough to make up the 2.5 feet, because the grade, Kurt knows better than than most of us, I think, how far that would be to make that difference. I don't know. All right, so public comment. I was looking, I don't see any hands up, so I don't know if anybody in the public was wanting to add any comments to what the discussion has been right here. We're over time already, but we definitely want to make sure we're getting the voices heard. So Liz, it looks like there's a couple hands if you're able to bring those into the meeting so we can hear from folks. I'd appreciate it.
Sure. First is Leslie Sherk. And Leslie, go ahead.
Hi, I just have a comment. If there were some landmarks on the diagrams of the site plan, like so that you would know where is the north wall of the library compared to what is existing at that park. Is it at the ball field screen or just where it is? I think that would be helpful. Where is, well, I guess you can see the back wall, but it's hard to know how much park space is being utilized by the option 3 plan. And then I just want to say that there's a difference between open park space and what is useful park space. If there were nice seating areas in that corridor or a patio, that to a lot of people would be all the park space they would see themselves using as they were coming and going from the library Hey, I'll meet you in front of the library and we can have a chat outside if the weather's nice. That kind of a thing is a very useful kind of park space to me. I don't see myself using the trolley. I use the trolley trail every day, so I can't see myself doing a loop in the park, but as being in the library, having an open vista into the park and lovely trees would be very nice. So when I think that people would be able to understand better if they could see where that wall is going to be and how much of the park space that they can envision would actually be taken up. Also, the parking space with the landscaping that is going to be there, that's certainly going to look more park-like than it does now. So I just think that that's something that people need to keep in mind. It's going to be much more park-like regardless of how much open space there is. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie.
Next we have Wendy Reese Ilg. Go ahead, Wendy.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Gwenny, thank you.
Thanks for all of your hard work on all this. I've only been to a few of these meetings, but I can see how much you all have put into it, and just wanted to thank you. I have been putting some comments in the chat, but I didn't know if you could see them all. So I just, as a neighbor who collaborates a lot with the other neighbors in this neighborhood, I just wanted to speak up for everything you're doing to maximize the park space. I know that's really important. And when you look at a map of this area, there's not very much, if you zoom out. So it's really special that what we have here. And a lot of us in the neighborhood are doing the backyard habitat program, landscaping with native plants. And we've started to see an increase in the birds of prey in this area, and a lot of the avian wildlife and everything. And to me, that little park space just, has so much potential to connect some of the other projects that are happening in the neighborhood, and still be a beautiful place for people to enjoy. So yeah, I just wanted to speak up for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwendy. Appreciate your thoughts. And we've got, I think I'd like to say most of us have caught your comments in the chat as well. So don't think we didn't notice those.
Okay, next up we have Thelma Hagenmiller. Go ahead, Thelma.
Okay, I just want to say that you need to be cautious about what Cindy Becker or any of the other staff are saying when they tell you that the funding that the county is willing to fill in what isn't available. And they bring up the geo bonds and revenue bonds. You know that geo bonds have to go before the people for a vote. Revenue bonds, the county can go ahead and apply themselves, but those are your taxpayer dollars going out there that they're not talking about that. And so I just want you to be sure that you're listening. The other thing that I still think that the school should become an Arts and Culture and Heritage Center, and we should move the sports and athletics to Eastside Athletics, and I'm going to continue on that tack. Thank you.
Thank you, Thelma.
Thank you, Thelma. Doug, that is all I'm seeing for public comment.
All right, thanks, Liz. Appreciate it. Well, okay, gang. I guess the question now is where do we go from here? I don't know if we're feeling ready to say let's have a joint meeting again, along with members of the library board, along with members of the district advisory committee, similar to the folks who were at the, was it January 20th meeting, I believe was the last time all of us got together, to kind of share our thoughts on where we're at, where we're going. Does that seem like the best next step at this point? I don't know if we've gotten anything we could call consensus out of our meeting today. Grover?
Yeah, I just want to comment. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the dilemma. But I do know that next Wednesday, the District Advisory Committee is meeting, and this project is on that agenda. And I also know in the following week, the library board is meeting, and it will be on our agenda. I can't promise I'm not the one who makes it, but it will be discussed. So I think the need to make a choice now, knowing that there are other groups that are involved as well, I don't know that we need to make a change. I'm looking forward to seeing what we just saw, where I can study it on my own later. I'm looking forward to the stuff that Kim asked for as far as clear, on paper, detailed. Listen, we sat for 3.5 years and asked repeatedly for where's the money? No problem. And so what happened to the GEO bond? I mean, it just disappeared. And so where's the explanation for that? I'm not calling anybody out. Most of the people who had anything to do with it are all gone. But the point is, we need to have something that's clear, that explains what we are dealing with and what kind of money we're dealing with. One, I appreciate all the comments here. I'm confused when we say option 3, option 4, and I don't know which one is 4, and so on and so forth. And then there was the one that Mark showed. So I'm not clear about that either. So if we can get all of that out so we can ponder it, I don't know that we have to do something right now. That's all I want to say. I think we need to see those things and have some time. I'm not up for a quick choice.
Like, I'm thinking conceptually we could talk about it.
Sure.
Nobody's interested in attaching the two projects together. So that's, I think it's safe in saying that's a moot point anymore. And so it comes down to, does it stay close to the community center or does it move away? And my feeling is there's probably consensus about keeping it close. Where exactly it lands, what the space is. If we could get there tonight, that'd be a big step forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd propose we take a vote on that. Thanks.
Kim, you had something to share, or you're agreeing we should take a vote?
I'm agreeing that the separated library is probably the best option, and I think we can potentially reach consensus on that.
Can we see those pictures again of what that one looked like? Seeing y'all, it's nice, but it doesn't give me answers. And so we're looking at, yeah, you can make
Which
those
picture do you want to
presentation
see?
size.
I'm not
Well,
sure which
I could
picture.
see both of those if you just made it the main picture. No, when you're just on is fine, just make it bigger.
I'm trying to, my computer is very, very old.
Current slide, there we go.
You're doing a good job, Cindy.
You are.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Here we go.
That's not the one you want.
Well, while it's there, let's talk for a second. The see those gradient lines that I was calling steps? I mean, I still love the idea. And if you look at that little grass area out there, just for me to consider that that could be a place that it's a pocket park with steps, and it could be a amphitheater, etc., as opposed to just showing the gradients. I don't know what else you're going to do with that space. So that's something to consider, as opposed to throwing out the steps. The steps were a big
Grover,
attraction for me.
I thought Grover too. I didn't mention this, but it's an observation that in the option 3, the plan on the left, they both are showing parking at the north end, or gosh, east.
Is that the
end,
top?
Sorry, east. Sorry.
Well, just say top.
Top at the top. is the parking lot. And what's interesting is the way the library kind of shields that a bit. And in the plan on the right, the parking is kind of very dominant. You'll see the cars kind of parked up on this topography, the area that you're talking about steps. The parking becomes a more prominent element in the park. And that's one of the things that, as we started to really evolve this option 3, kind of tempering the impact of the park, parking, needing to create the hammerhead for the fire truck, providing some parking there, but not having it have much visual impact on the park.
Okay. And then what was that to the left of in the left picture, that little white thing? I didn't understand the description of what that little white thing is with the 2 green dots at the bottom. No, to the left of the library.
Oh, the 3 dots?
Oh,
Yeah, what's that
so-
there with the dots and what is that?
Well, I think that was a potential water element, something that could either stay in the project or come out, but it would be adjacent or near the play area, but not too close. So it would be a splash pad, so to speak.
Okay, so there is no carryover of the steps idea or any outdoor amphitheater quality or outdoor lecture or any of that. That's all.
There is a little bit. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, on the right side option to the right of the library, right above where that circle green piece is. That
on the left one, Cindy, if someone's pointing, yeah, right there. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the amphitheater, so to speak, seating area on that option. And then on the right-hand side, it is just right of the library.
Okay, just a wild guess, how big is the capacity for that amphitheater? Because I can't get size, like 20 people, 50 people, 100 people?
No, it's probably not 100, but it could be anywhere from 30 to 50 people.
Okay, thanks. I guess that helps because without detail, I'm
sure.
There's the rendering of that view from the northwest starts to show the amphitheater a little bit, and it's something where it could be seating that wraps around. You could build up topography a little bit, but there's definitely kind of a sense of a story time, more intimate outdoor space. Keep going. We're getting close. Yeah, maybe it's after this. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, it's to the left.
It's a little hard to see, but there's a couple of people sitting on stairs. There's probably like 4 risers high. 4 steps high, and they'd be 18 inches wide, so it's a place to sit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, my proposal was about this model right here that's closest to the community center. Can we vote on if that proximity, freestanding, but at that proximity, whether you move it around or not, can we vote on that?
Well, maybe let's start. I think it'd be fair to say among the task force members who are present here right now, how many people are in favor of the library being a detached facility as opposed to attached to the school? Let's go with that for starters. Let's see, Christy, I don't know if you're able to catch it. She votes detached. Okay. And did we lose Shonda? I don't see her here. Shonda, are you here? Might have lost her. But I guess that's all of us, at least that are here. Oh, Shonda, there you are. Shonda, what are your thoughts on a detached library?
Liz,
Doug,
you have to unmute her.
I think she had her hand up when you asked the question. If that helps.
Can you unmute her?
Can you hear
There we
me?
go.
Okay, Shonda.
Now we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I feel a little bit handicapped and disadvantaged with my little tablet. I cannot see the pictures, and I have requested to have hard copies like Catherine sent us in the initial going through of this project to really be able to study them and sit at home and actually look at them. So I am not going to be voting because I don't have enough information. I can't see the pictures.
This presentation will be on the website tomorrow.
Doesn't help on my little teeny tablet.
We have Shonda's address to mail. Jason, can you? Yeah. We'll send you a hard copy.
I will. I just didn't have enough time to get it to her, and I was after this meeting, I was gonna send her the latest, greatest of that so she can study that. So I apologize for not having it before this meeting.
Okay, well, it would be, yeah, I appreciate that. It would be great to have this slide presentation in a paper format. Sorry to be so old-fashioned, but it really helps me to understand what's going on.
I'm wondering if that's just in the interest of not having Shonda have to wait for snail mail. I'm wondering if that's something that could be printed out at the Oak Lodge Library. And Shonda, if at some point this weekend you'd be able to stop by and pick it up. Is that something, Mitzi, Jason, you could work out?
Possibly. We can do 11 by 17. That's the largest.
Yeah, that's bigger than my computer screen.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Yeah, we can figure
Mitzi,
something
that
out.
could work.
All right, that'd be super, because yeah, we want to make sure everybody's getting their chance to weigh in their perspective. But the majority of us, I think, I was seeing we're agreeing with the detached library. Do we want to go as far as to ask about how many people agree that the one with the closer proximity to the school is the preferred option?
What's the harm in asking?
I'm asking. Thoughts on that? Okay. Most of us, Grover's holding back. Christy, what about you? Christy agrees as well. Okay. So we'll wait for Shonda's thoughts on that as well. And we don't have Grover's vote there. So there's at least that much we've got our collective thoughts on, at least where we know where we all stand. As Grover mentioned, we've got meetings coming up again, but from both the DAC and the library board. So we'll have further input. And then should we plan on scheduling a joint meeting early April? I'm going to be out of.
What would be the purpose of bringing all these groups together? Because in 2 hours doesn't give us a lot of time when you've got a lot of people talking. I think we're already saying it's a detached library. I think the bulk of the people are leaning towards closer. I'm just not sure what would the outcome we would want in that meeting, to listen to the other groups. Many of you are on the other groups.
That's a good point, Dennis. Do people feel like we need more time and more discussion, or are we ready to tell the design team that as far as this task force is concerned, the majority of us at least are saying we like where you're going with option 3.
I would like to do that, and I wouldn't mind spending more time with this group around that piece of it, frankly.
All right.
That's just me. I'm just one of many. So
Okay.
speak your truth, people.
All right. Let's got some hands up. Let's hear from Cindy.
Thanks. So we need a little bit of direction. The joint meeting, the second joint meeting was asked at the first joint meeting, but that was before a lot of these conversations happened. So you're right, Dennis, it's up to you all if you want to have another joint meeting. We would like to bring this to the board. What will happen, whether or not you have a joint meeting or you just decide to have these individual meetings, we will have a policy session with the board. We will bring forward to the board what the various committees are recommending. And we will also do a staff report, and we'll also talk about what our recommendation is. So, which may or may not be in line with what the community is saying, but the board will see all of it. And we will talk about the options, we will talk about the costs, we will talk about the designs. I think it's important to know that if you are moving forward with your desire for the detached building, this is not the end of the conversation about that. There will be additional meetings to talk about specific pieces of that design. So and then we will be talking about the money. We will also, Kim, your request, send information to everybody. So there won't be surprises. You know, you'll see the information. You'll see where the money was, why it changed. Again, we're at a little bit of a handicap because, as somebody said earlier, none of us were around except Mitzi when these first numbers were developed. And so we believe that they were best case scenarios, and many of which are not turning out to be true. We will talk about a geo bond. We will talk about the process for a geo bond. So we'll give you all that information. So the question really is, you know, if you want to have a joint meeting, again, that's up to y'all. We would like to go to the board as early in April as possible, but that will depend on what you all want to do. The other thing that I would like to ask is this, the option with the library moved away from the building. If that's an option that you all feel strongly about, we're going to have to cost it out. We're going to have to do the additional work to get all that, because we can't just say, here's another placement and not show the cost of a 2-story building, the cost of that. So again, that's something the group wants us to do. We're going to need some direction on that. And you know, we just need to hear from you all.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. I think we're working towards that as we speak, I believe. Ron, go ahead.
2 things. One is, do we even have a quorum tonight? I mean, are we even prepared to vote on anything? I don't remember what the charter says about a quorum specifically. And the second thing is, I would be interested in seeing the letter that has come from the community council. And also, I believe there was a letter on its way or already arrived from the library advisory board. I would like to see both if possible. Jason, if you could arrange that.
Yeah, Mitzi posted basically the text of the letter that the library board, she put that in the chat when we began our meeting. It was pretty succinct. And there it is again, if you wanted to read that part.
And I can, I'll send out this updated presentation, and I can always attach that with that also.
Mike, I think it's up to you next.
Yeah, I really don't see that there'd be a huge benefit in having a joint meeting. I would, if anything, I would like to have another meeting a month with us and see if we can edge closer to a consensus on the close versus far ideas that have been put forth, and work it that way, and the sooner the better.
All right. Well, we're not unanimous at this point, but I think there's definitely a strong leaning by those of us who are here to say we like the idea of a detached library not too far from the school building. Ron?
of a certain size.
Okay.
Okay, we need to be clear about that.
And sustainable.
I think if we got together one more time, we could list this out as a proposal and that's going to go. I think that would be really powerful. I think that would be great. I did have a question for Cindy. When will you have, and will we get it before the meeting, your proposal to the commissioners?
That's a great question, Dennis. There's certain protocols that we have to follow in terms of who gets information when, and I will find those out for you because they're different for different things. So as soon as I can send it to you, I will. Whether or not that is the day before, the day of, or the week before, I will let you know.
Yeah, thank you. Just not that I see it coming, but I didn't see the surprise coming a year ago either. I just don't want to be surprised. Like, what? I don't think that's going to happen, but
no.
Thank you.
No.
All right. So at this point, then it sounds like we're talking about setting up a date for another task force meeting following the couple library board and DAC meetings. So we'll, I guess, have Jason get something like that as far as a proposed date for that to us.
Excuse me, Doug, I think
Yes.
it would be great if you could maybe email the other groups and tell, because I committed to hosting a joint meeting. And so it'd be great if you could email the chairs of the other groups to say, you know, we don't think that's necessary, because I don't want there to be mixed messages.
And you don't want to wait till those groups have met, because there are people here who will see those, but you're wanting to get something to them ASAP. In other words,
Will they be meeting soon?
DAC meets next week. Is that right, Grover?
Yeah,
And then library board meets the week after the
on Thursday the following week, 17th.
So we got in 2 weeks, both the other boards will have met.
Yeah. What's wrong with the 24th for us to be?
Excuse me?
The 24th of March.
Is when, okay.
That's in. That's in
2
3 weeks.
It's spring
3
break
weeks.
and people might be out of town.
Okay. Well, I'm going to assume for the time being that there isn't going to be a joint meeting. Again, it would be because I've got to calendar this stuff on the Board of Commissioners calendar. I need, I can't just drop it on them, and we have to have everything the week before. Anyway, I'm not trying to burden you with that. I'm just saying that sooner we have a decision, because a joint meeting will delay everything another couple of weeks to get everyone's calendars. And that's fine if you want to do it, but it would just be helpful to know that sooner.
Sure.
I'll leave it up to you, but it's just, we're trying to schedule this around your needs.
I think we're saying not a joint meeting, but a meeting of this task force.
Yes.
Yeah, we can say that, but we can't say that the library board would agree to that, or that the district advisory committee would agree to that. So that's I think what we're up against. Go ahead, Grover.
I am, and I'm going along the same line. So you guys are going. The truth is, we're talking about a separate library, and so that really isn't as much an NCPRD conversation. If that's the direction it goes, I can't speak for other people and so on and so forth. But most of the focus is they don't want to really talk about libraries. They want to talk about the parks part of it and the community center part of it, and we're stepping away from that by consensus, by unanimity, whatever. So I don't know that it's that important, and the library board will have a chance to meet on the 17th, and we're not getting out of it. I mean, we're staying in this conversation. So I don't know that I'm committed to an all group meeting. We could find out what the DAC people have to say. That could be asked at the next meeting, at their meeting next Wednesday, to find out if they have a big interest in that.
Yeah.
But I would like this group to have another chance to meet after we've had a chance to see the things we haven't seen and consider the things we haven't considered.
So the 24th is what is 3 weeks from today. I'm going to be in. Yeah, but that is spring break, as somebody mentioned. I'm going to be out of state. I can't say that I wouldn't have this is the upside of virtual. I don't know if it's upside or downside. Upside or downside of virtual meetings is you can meet from wherever you are, even if you're on vacation. The 31st is still March. I know, Cindy, that's getting awfully close to early April. It's as close to early April as you can get and still be March. But what do people think?
Fine with me.
Does that work for people?
The 31st?
Yeah.
31st.
By the way, I have to tell you, I can meet in many states and countries and have, so it works fine.
Oh, excuse me. No, I'm not going to be out of state in March. I'm going to be out of state in April. I'm jumping ahead. I'm already looking forward to my vacation.
So you're gonna do the 24th then?
That is spring break. I don't know. How do people feel about?
Chrissy has kids.
Yeah. Let's not do spring break.
Yeah.
All right, 31st.
Yeah.
31st. Anybody not able to do the 31st?
Not that I'm
I'll
aware
be
of
out
at this
of town,
point.
but I can do it.
Good. Thank you, Shonda, being a road warrior.
The
Okay.
earliest that it could go to the board would probably be the 13th of April, or that week, the 12th to 13th. Again, that assumes no joint meeting.
Correct. Well, I would say, like Grover suggested, we'll know about a joint meeting after next Wednesday.
Okay.
Or by, yeah.
The other question I would ask you is whether or not, given where people are with the separate detached structure, again, if you're gonna want us to do a full costing out of the structure on Olive, that's gonna be more time and money, to be honest with you. So.
Well, I think you had the majority of us. Shonda hasn't seen it, and Grover did not vote, but the majority of us said we weren't interested in that. So I don't know if I would put the effort into it at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody was suggesting that can we meet Thursday of next week? What's going on then?
I'm not sure that gives time to flip the paperwork that's people requested around and giving people time to read it. That's
okay. I'm just passing along a text I got from.
I don't know if I dare ask how many people really think we need another meeting of the task force. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, Doug, I think it's important that that the next meeting we come up with a white paper or something, or at least highlights about what we're proposing. Some of the terms have been mentioned and so on, but that could be the bulk of that meeting, I suppose.
All right, so see you all on the 31st then.
Doug, I'm sorry, real quick, this is Liz.
Yes,
we
Liz.
have Jan Carruthers in the attendees with a hand up. I don't believe we said we officially closed the public comment. Did you want to allow her to make a comment?
How do people feel? We're well over our time, but do we want to have Jan? Do you want to hear from her? Well, she's been having some comments. Yeah, go ahead, Liz. Let's hear from Jan.
Hi, Jan, go ahead.
I forgot my hand was up because I have been writing as many things as I could in the chat. I am concerned about those since it was a point that those other boards wanted to have an opinion. Are you suggesting that you're going to hand them a proposal that is the proposal for which they have no say, over which they have no say? No, and I'm not clear that you've actually come to a decision, so I suggest you meet again. That's just my opinion.
We're not proposing for anyone other than the task force.
Yeah, I think, Jan, we are planning to meet again. And there are members of this task force that will be present at those meetings and will be able to convey what was, not to mention Jason and Cindy, I'm guessing are be in those meetings as well. Or I don't know, Cindy, if you go to the DSE meetings but anyway, yes, that information, the discussion that's happened tonight will be conveyed to those meetings as well. So we're not trying to leave anybody out of it. It's just each of us collectively is trying to do our part.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one more time, is there any way you can meet before the 31st?
Yeah,
It's
like
just,
next week.
That's a long time, and it's really pushing everything. And we've got commissioners who are just saying, what's the deal?
Well, I actually think we ought to let them know what's the deal that we had to deal with. I mean, it's not like,
I'm
what's the
sorry,
deal?
that was just me. That was just
I got it, but we were fat, dumb, and happy 6 months ago, and here we are.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm sorry, Cindy. I feel like we're kind of stuck. We don't want to force the process.
Right.
Could we meet on Wednesday, the 16th?
That's a Gladstone task force meeting, I believe. Somebody can confirm.
It's a design development drawings review, the Gladstone. Yeah.
Gladstone Task Force is on the 16th of March.
And we're only Monday through Thursday of options because of staffing limitations. Is that correct?
About Tuesday, the 15th.
The Ides of March.
Yeah. And then the library board would meet after that on Thursday. Fine with me. Can the staff give us what we wanted by then? Because that was the other thing we were waiting for, is not to rush them. So they need to weigh in on that.
We will work on, when you say what you wanted, it's my understanding what you're looking for now is a more of a comprehensive description of the cost changes and how those happened. Was there something else that you wanted besides that? We're going to go through all the costs and what happened. Was there anything else you wanted?
Well, we were going to get, there was some discussion about the cost differences over a 20-year time period for radiant heat versus not operate the full. What is the cost? Cost to install it and then cost to use it in real numbers, both ways. So that's important to me. I grew up with radiant heat. I miss it.
And Jason, my understanding is we'll have that, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got part of that answer. We just need to, PNC is helping us work on the cost of installing those systems. So I think we can get that by that time.
Okay. And was there, you guys talked about the CLT and the DLT, and we don't know where those fit in a costing thing, and if it's just a little bit, and maybe somebody said, yeah, well, maybe the county would go ahead and do the extra to be in line with their bigger mission of sustainability, et cetera. But we don't have any costs to talk about, so we don't know about that. And then the last thing that I'm kind of curious about, though, is if doing the two-story building is significantly more expensive, the question was, how much does it less? Because you're not going to be moving nearly as much dirt to do that. That was a question that never got addressed. I don't know if that, maybe I'm living in my own dream world, but when I go out there and stand on the site, a whole lot less dirt gets moved to do it that way.
I think Kurt spoke to that. I think Kurt said that it's not there, it's negligible. The dirt's going to have to be moved anyway. I think that's what he said. I don't want to speak for Kurt.
Yeah.
I thought that was Jim that made that point, but maybe
Jim, Kurt.
Yeah, we're interchangeable. Yeah. Yeah, there's also potentially more fill, and you'd have to import fill on the west side of the site as well.
We're kind of straying from setting the meeting.
Yeah. Let's get back to that.
Details of.
No, actually, we're not. We were talking about whether we would have the answers we wanted by time for the meeting, and that's exactly what this conversation is about. So I apologize if that looks like straying to you, but that was the question on the table.
Okay. So is the 15th work?
Well, I saw a comment from Christy about Mondays. What are Mondays like for people? Monday the 14th. Is that better than, because I know that it's difficult for Christy to do.
Okay.
Now she said the 15th could work. Is Tuesday better than Monday?
Yes, for us it is.
All right. Tuesday the 15th then. Jason, shoot that out because there's a couple people who had to leave. And let's get a confirmation on that.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm. And we're in the process of costing some of this stuff. So Grover, I think we can get a lot of your questions answered, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody for your work. What's that?
I just want to put it in context. When we're talking about spending what $15 million, I'm one of those guys who checks everything in twice and then still figures it out, and it's that's why. And we did most of that leading up to our last attempt, and now that's all different. So I don't want to shorten the time by 2 weeks just because. And if we spend a few $1,000 more to find out the answers in the scheme of things, I'd rather have something we're thrilled with as opposed to, well, if we had more time, it would have been better. But that's my perspective.
All right. I think ultimately we're just trying to figure out some of the bigger things at this point. There's gonna be finer things in terms of what money comes in. There's gonna be finer things in terms of what money gets spent for the next couple of years in this project. At the moment, we want to be able to give some direction in terms of what we're as a community, what we're looking for. So I think that's what we're after at this point, is coming to consensus. It's been said by a number of folks, both inside this task force, other boards, and the community. We want to be able to go to the commissioners with something that this community says we all are in favor of. I know Cindy would love to be able to go to a meeting and say, I'm overwhelmingly hearing this from, we've given them all these options and here's what everybody is saying they want to go forward with. So hopefully we can get there. We'll plan on seeing you guys all on the 15th. Thanks everybody there's a lot of effort put into this, a lot of thought, heart and soul from so many of you. And I, for one, appreciate it. And I think I'd like to think most of the rest of you do too. So take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, folks.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Good job.
Dennis.